Good morning, friends. Thank you, Jolie. You'll flatter me. Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm gonna take a deep breath, and I'm gonna exhale it at roughly this tone, my speaking voice tone, and I'm gonna try to maintain that tone for as long as I can. You can follow along if you like. Take a deep breath in. That was a little loud. I'm sorry. Sorry if I offended you with the bell. So, today we are going to say some old words. We're going to repeat some old words that we've been repeating for 2,000 years. At the very least, 6 months. Shabbat Shalom, Batya. Shabbat Shalom. You know, Peachy, there's a very interesting video essay by a trans man named Corvidae about Shrek and a queer reading of Shrek. It's very compelling. Yeah. You should check it out. What language is that? What language do I sing in? Can anyone let Q17 know? Also, what do I do for work? So, we're going to say some old words. The first set are in Hebrew, yes. Shema means listen. Good morning. Yes, I know I haven't been on your feed. It's because I haven't been posting. But I'm going to be posting very soon. Stay tuned. I'll probably have a new video up every day next week, is my hope. If not every day, every other day. Something soon. Good morning. Yeah, so we're going to say the Shema. And then we'll read from this book here about Ba'a. And then we'll say some words in Sanskrit. Go back to Hebrew. You know, I only know a few words of Hebrew too. One day I'll spend some time in Israel and I'll actually learn Hebrew, like as a language. I think that's important. One day. But for now, all I know is what I've memorized. But it's pretty good. It does what I need it to do. And I think there's something, very interesting that happens psychologically, like sonically, when you pray with words that you generally know the meaning of, right? Like you know the holistic meaning of them, the meta meaning, but that you don't know the specific meaning of the syllables or the grammatical context of any of the words that you're saying, right? So like when I say those prayers in Hebrew, specifically because I don't understand Hebrew, He thought Shabbat and Shabbos were two different things. They're two different accents. Yeah, so like you can get mistakes like that, right? When you lack phonetic context, like lexical context, the meaning of things changes, right? So like I can hold on to the meta meaning of the Shema and the V'ahavta and the words that come after. Jolie, I have a question for you. So I noticed this thing, like the last time I was at a like more formal Jewish service, that the traditional way of doing the Shema and the V'ahavta, like the conservative Jewish way that I learned, where did I post it? I think I pinned it in live stream chat. That after the V'ahavta is completed, there's a jump to a quote from the Book of Numbers, which says basically the same content as what the continuing quote in Deuteronomy is. Right, like the quote from the Book of Numbers is, "Then thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God, I am Adonai." I'll go through it when I do the... Anyway, like there's a version that comes if you just read the Book of Deuteronomy straight, and then there's a version where you like splice in this quote from Numbers, which is the version that I learned. And I wonder why that happened. I'll do the prayer and then it'll make a little bit more sense. I don't know if you can speak to what you learned. In any case, let's say some words, huh? Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. ואהבת את ענת אלוהיך ובכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאוד על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. וחיה כי הביאך יהוה אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר נספה לאבותיך לאברהם ליצחק וליעקב, לתת לך ערים גדולות וטובות אשר לא בנית, ובתים מלאים כל טובה אשר לא מילאת, ובארות עצובים אשר לא עשת, כרבים וזיתים אשר לא נטעת, והלכת ושבת. הישמר לך פן תשכח את יהוה אשר תישך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. Right, and that last bit, which comes immediately after the V'ahavta in Deuteronomy, when Yahweh Eloheinu brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to you, great and flourishing cities that you did not build, houses full of all good things that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves, and you eat your fill. Take heed that you do not forget Yahweh, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Right? And that was what I found when I went back. Like, I'd learned these words. And the first time I was in Israel, I went to the Western Wall, and this Hasidic man passed me the Hebrew, right? Like on a little piece of paper, and go daven at the wall. And I realized that I had learned those words. Yeah. Iman tiskru vasitem et kol mitzvotai. Yeah. Which, so the translation of that, that from Numbers is, thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Right, so it's like, kind of means the same thing as what comes directly from Deuteronomy. But what comes in Deuteronomy reads to me much more like a threat from Yahweh almost, which is why I change my voice on those specific things, right? Like, I read those words as kind of threatening, right? Like in Numbers, it's just the commandment, right? Like, you shall remember me, right? It's like very simple, right? And then it says Adonai over and over and over again, right? I brought you out of Egypt, remember me, I am Adonai, right? Whereas this, it has this first part that's like, hey, when you come out of Egypt and you're given all of these gifts, houses that you did not build and hewn cisterns that you did not hew, right? Like when you're given all of these wonderful things that aren't yours, right? That are literally stolen, acknowledged in the prayer, right? When you're given these things that aren't yours, remember that God took you out of Egypt, right? And I don't know, just like, to me, I can't help like inserting in this ellipsis in there, like, because he could take it away from you again, right? And also just like, I don't know, like I wonder why the quote from Numbers was put in instead of this. Like, when did that happen, right? Like, certainly if this is what the contiguous lines of Deuteronomy were, then like in Second Temple Judaism, this was what they were saying. But then some point after Second Temple Judaism, the liturgy changed to include that piece from Numbers instead. And I have no idea when that happened. Like maybe it's an American thing. Like Batya, do you say a similar sequence in Israel? Anyway, I don't know. I have this silly, nerdy question about, like, the mimetics of liturgies, and I don't really know who to ask and answer for. But I think it's interesting, like, why certain prayers, certain parts of the Torah are chosen to be emphasized and why parts are not. You don't think so? So in your synagogues, you don't insert that bit from the Book of Numbers? Or you do? Yeah, like it feels like a very political move. Like I can imagine a story that like Zionist Americans in the 40s like were like, hey, you know what the conservative movement should do, or at the origin of the conservative movement, right? Because the origin of the conservative movement is tied up with a kind of political Zionism. Like they're like, oh, maybe we should take out that part that's like, hey, we stole this land. Like maybe that's not appropriate to keep. Like I don't know. The things we're taught and the things we're not taught. Like, I wonder why. Yeah, and I guess that's why I so often want to return to this, right? Like, this is the oldest meme in this lineage that I know of, right? And the fact that this book is in continuous lineage with the Shema and the V'ahavta is like surprising. Like the way Jewish history is taught, you're not supposed to think that these are the same culture, but they are, right? Like they evolved into one another. And so if I can find some of the motifs, some of the stories that are buried in here, right? Ideas about kinship and kingship and purity and sacrifice and what it means to have a home, right? Like this story is all about what it means to have a home. Like build me a house. Like it's the same thing as Yahweh asking Solomon to build his temple. Like it's literally the same sequence of parts. So if I can understand the way that the story originated and how it changed over time, I can get a better context for why my tradition is the way it is now. So, where we left off in this story, Baal had just gone down into the underworld. They'd finished his temple, right? He became king, and he's demanding, build me a temple, build me a house. And so this Hermes character, Kothar Wahhasis, is like, okay, but you have to leave room in it. And Baal's like, no, I won't. And finally, Baal relents and he leaves room, and then death comes. And death says, you think you're the king of everything, well, you're not. You need to die now. And there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and rending of sackcloth, and but eventually we get here. And Baal the conqueror obeyed, and he went down to the land of death. But first, he fell in love with a heifer on the desert pasture, a young cow in the fields on death's door. He slept with her 77 times. He mounted her 88 times, and she became pregnant, and she bore him the Lord. What does that mean? What is the word Lord in here, right? Because Lord is always a an anglicized translation, right? Like, so in the Bible, when you say Lord, you mean Adonai, which means the Tetragrammaton, right? So like, but in here, I read another translation where instead of the word Lord, it said, and she bore him Moshe. And I've no idea, that was just like some weird internet translation. It wasn't cited. Like, I don't, the scholarship was not good, but I'm like, what? Who does Baal's calf give birth to? Anyway, then he dies, right after that very enigmatic, right? He mounted a cow, yes. So Baal's about to die, and he goes to this pasture at the foot of the mountain of death, and before he goes underneath it, he fell in love with a heifer on a desert pasture, a young cow in the fields on death's shore. He slept with her 77 times. He mounted her 88 times. She became pregnant, and she bore him the Lord. Like, what is that? Right? Like, there's echoes of like Zeus, right, descending down from the heavens and raping a cow. Also like Yahweh and Mary, right? Like there's all of these, this story happened over and over in the Eastern Mediterranean. But like, what does it mean? She bore him the Lord. She bore God, right? She created the next generation of divinity. Because Baal died. Yeah, it's wild. Like these images that are in this old story. And now there's grieving for the death of Baal. We arrived at the pleasant place. We arrived at the pleasant place, the desert pasture, at the fields on death's shore. We came upon Baal. He had fallen to the ground. Baal the conqueror has died. The prince, the lord of the earth, has perished. Then El, the kind, the compassionate, came down from his throne, sat on his stool, and coming down from his stool, he sat on the ground. He poured earth on his head as a sign of mourning. On his skull the dust in which he rolled. He covered his loins with sackcloth. He cut his skin with a knife. He made incisions with a razor. Self-harm, as mourning. He cut his cheeks and chin. He raked his arms with a reed. He plowed his chest like a garden. Literally rent open his chest like a plow so that new life could come out of it. He raked his back like a valley. He raised his voice and shouted, Baal is dead. What will happen to the peoples? Dagon's son, what will happen to the masses? I will go down into the earth in Baal's place. Anat also was taking a walk and wandering on every mountain in the heart of the earth, on every hill in the heart of the fields. She arrived at the desert pasture, the pleasant place, the lovely fields on death's shore. She came upon Baal. She had fallen to the ground. She covered her loins with sackcloth and wept. And that, right there, is the climax of the Baal cycle. There's more, like Baal and death have to fight, and Anat's going to turn him into grain. Like there's a death and rebirth story here. He's Jesus. Yeah, so, but that image, right, like Baal dies, and all of the gods around him, they come down and they hurt themselves in mourning, in sacrifice. It's quite an image. I believe in Jesus, right? I believe in Jesus to the same extent that I believe in Baal. Right? Like they are literally the same character, right? Baal's story evolved into Jesus' story. They are the same God. They are the Son of God. They produce the next God. Right? So to the extent that the story of Jesus is true, the story of Baal is true, right? And the word true there is useless. The word believe there is useless. But they're stories, right? Like I read them and I feel them. Right? And for thousands of years, people have been hearing these stories and they've been affected by them, and it's changed the way the world is shaped, right? So of course they're real. Like, of course I believe in them, right? You can't look at the world today and not be like, oh, look at all the things that Jesus did, right? He put out franchise steeples, every small town in America. That's an incredible thing that Jesus could do that. Like, what did Baal do? He gave birth to the modern world. So, what book is that? The title is called Stories from Ancient Canaan, translated by David Coogan. Michael David Coogan. They're very good stories. Like, this book is very accessible because it's just got the pure stories, right? And like, there's all this question about translation. Like, there's no footnotes or anything. Like, when I want to know about when it says you bore him the Lord, like, what do you mean? What's the context in that? I know nothing. All I have is this translation of the story. It is what it is. No, I'm just drinking water. Just keep it in this carton because I like it. So, happy Saturday. Have a lovely day. I'm glad that you found the story interesting and compelling. Like, I've often been wondering, right? Like, I've been reading a minute or two from the Baal cycle every day for the last 2 or 3 months. And like, I was like trying to build up to that moment, right? Like, because you can't just read that moment in isolation without context. Like, you have to like understand who those characters are, right? But it's funny, like, I'm sure that none of you heard the entire thing that I read. You just heard like little bits of it, and that's also the way that people received it, right? Like, each of these images, like Baal having sex with a cow, or like El ripping off his clothing in grief, right? Like, these are images that would have been passed down like little memes in the ancient world. So it's cool. I'm really happy that I got to share it with you. Maggie, you can call me Teresa. The Greek in my name is Tiresias. You can look up Tiresias if you want. Just another myth about a trans human. It's a good myth. Yeah. So now we'll say Arati. And so Arati comes from a totally different tradition, right? This comes from the Shivananda tradition, which is an ashram school that I learned from when I was young. And saying this prayer often it kind of has the same purpose of going over the Baal cycle, right? Like, you familiarize yourself with all these different names of God, and once you know the names, you can parse their stories a little bit. And once you've parsed their stories, you can understand how all the stories are the same. Oh gosh, what's happening here? Slip. You can understand how all their stories are the same, and how they're all connected. So we're going to say a bunch of different names of God from the Vedic tradition. We're not going to go over their stories in detail, but they're linked, right? I say Jesus' name towards the end, and Moses and Buddha. Right? Like, I like this prayer because it's very pluralistic. You can recognize all the gods, old and new, and how they interplay with one another. What are my goals in life? What religion is this? You know, those are some really profound questions, my friend. I think they're too big to have answers. Jaya Jaya Ratiya Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jaya Ratiya Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jaya Ratiya Venugopala Venugopala Venugola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jaya Rati Venkanta Ramana Venkanta Ramana Sankata Harana Sita Rama Radhe Shama Jaya Jaya Rati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jaya Jaya Rati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi Mahasaraswati Mahakali Mahashakti Jaya Jaya Rati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jaya Rati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimutaravatara Jaya Jaya Rati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskareya Jaya Jaya Rati Sanistaraya Sanistaraya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Rati Sankarachaya Sankarachaya Advaita Guravi Jaya Jaya Rati Sadguru Datta Sadguru Datta Shivananda Devananda, Jaya Jayarati Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Jaya Jayarati Agastya Munaye, Agastya Munaye, Shriyama Priyaye, Jaya Jayarati Ayapa Samine, Ayapa Samine, Dharma Shastrave, Jaya Jayarati Jesus Grave, Moses Grave, Buddha Grave, Jaya Jayarati Muhammad Grave, Guru Nanak Grave, Samastya Gurubho Namaha, Jaya Jayarati Venugopala. Natatra Suyobati Natandra Karatam Nema Vidyobati Kutoya Magni Twameva Bantamanamanti Sarvam Tasya Basya Sambidam Vivanti Om Gange Kayomane Kaiva Govari Saraswati Narmate Sri Kaveri Hiya Namastitam Namo Namaha. Twameva Mata Japita Twameva, Twameva Bandusha Saka Twameva, Twameva Vidya, Javinam Twameva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Kayena Vacha, Manasendriyarva, Budyat Manava Prakrite Sabhavad, Karumyad Yad, Mangalam Parasmahi, Narayana Iti Sarmar Payami. Sarvadharmam pravichaya mamikam sarvadam vrija aham sva sarva papayo mokshaya mima sucha. Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these I dedicate to you. And now we will say Kaddish. Say Kaddish for all those people who died yesterday, for all those people who have ever had their homes stolen, for all those people who have ever had stolen homes given to them. All the way back for 2,500 years. Our ancestors have been saying these words in response to death and tragedy. Yidgadal Vidgadash Meraba. Biama Divrachyote Viam Lichmal Kute. Bachayachon of Yamachon of Chayidikal Be Israel. Bagala Visman Kari Fimru. Amin. Yehe Shemir Abame Va'archli Alam Almei Almaya Yidbrach Vishtabach Vipa'ar V'Urman V'Naseh Vidadar Vidalei Vidalal Shemei Dukudesha Barichu Leila Mikol Birchata Vishirata Tushbechata V'Nechimata Diamiran Bialma Vimru Amin Yehe Shlamar Abamin Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Yachol Yisrael Vimru Amin Ose Shalom Vimru Malav Huya Ase Shalom Aleinu V'Yachol Yisrael Vimru Amin. Oh, say shalom bimrama, oh, yeah, say shalom aleinu, v'alechol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Thank you so much for joining me today to say these words one more time. Feels like we got to go a little bit deeper into them than I normally go. I really like that when that happens. It's hard to get to some of these places, right? Like, even though I say these words over and over and over, there's new meanings that you can bring out of them. That's why I say them. I hope your day is great too, Kimmy. I'm gonna eat a little bit of buckwheat, so I'm not gonna go just yet, but probably won't eat the whole bowl because my stomach, I had a little bit of stomach upset last night, so my appetite isn't very large, but I am hungry, so stay tuned. Stay right there. I'll be back in a minute. So, for the first time in a long time, I have fresh greens in my rice cooker because my partner brought me them. These are little bolting kale shoots. Wow, that is extremely good. This might be like my favorite thing to eat ever. Yay for green things being back. Indeed. This tattoo is, it's an Ouroboros. Thank you, Jolie. This particular Ouroboros, I can show you, actually. I have time. I don't just have to go edit. I finished my editing job. I have time to hang out with you. Here, let me show you the primary source. Okay, so this is a very trashy book. Some, like, you know, I don't like the way the book is framed, but the art that it captures is excellent. Alright, where's Cleopatra? Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra. So Cleopatra was an Alexandrian alchemist. She was operating in... Here we are, yes, in the very beginning. So she was an alchemist who worked in Alexandria in the 2nd century after Christ, right? And this was a period of time of incredible religious transformation, right? So you had Greek traditions and Roman traditions mixing with Egyptian traditions in Alexandria. And then after the destruction of the Second Temple, there was an influx of, and the, you know, all the wars. There was an influx of foreign people into Alexandria, Christians and Jews. And so that context in the early centuries of Christianity was just one of, like, incredible religious mimetic development and creativity. So Cleopatra was an alchemist writing in Greek, but the Ouroboros is, I mean, it's a Mediterranean symbol, but it's more often used in Egypt, right? So this is the original illustration from Cleopatra's manuscripts. They're about 1800 years old. In the center in Greek it says all is one. There's that. So I have this tattoo here. I got this tattoo when I transitioned, sort of like a way of marking time. Yeah, all is one. Cleopatra, the work that we have saved from her is just a few pages of manuscript with the word chrysopoeia in them. Chrysopoeia, Christ making, right? Like it's a Christian-inspired word, but literally it's gold making, right? What she was trying to do is perfect matter. There's also in that, I didn't highlight them, but this manuscript has the first known illustration we have of an alchemist's distilling vessel. Oh, that's this. This is the oldest picture we have of any distillation vessel. I'm pretty sure. And so she was putting matter into the vessel and cooking it and doing all these transformations to it in order to try to perfect the matter, right? To make it more Christ-like. This is where the myth of the Philosopher's Stone comes from, right? That if you can understand the root source of all things, right? What is it that makes matter alive? Like how can living and non-living matter convert into one another? Right? If you can understand that, then you have the keys to divinity, right? Because that is what God does. God is what makes living things alive and non-living things dead. Oh, Katie, this book is trashed. This book is totally trash. Do not buy this book. Right? Like it's some like pop magazine series. Like the production quality of the book is very high. The information it has is 100% garbage. The reason why I'm showing it to you is because although like all the analysis in the book is like woo American astrology, the images that they have are very good images, right? So like purely the only thing that I want you to pay attention to is this image of Cleopatra. This book will not teach you anything useful except show you some pictures, which I guess is useful. Like there's a reason why I have it, but like I don't. I am extremely skeptical of some of the claims made in this book, and I just want just be aware of that. Yeah, I do. Let me give you... Oh gosh. Hold on, I'm having a problem.